Welcome to the Watchful Citizen Show. We're sponsored by the Lancaster County Democrats, and my name is Barbara Beyer. And today we are going to go and talk about some issues that have been at the forefront of our community for the last several months. And that has to do with the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, youth who self-identify as part of that community, and how we as a whole society, us together here in Lincoln, go and treat them, welcome them, etc. Today our guests are Dr. Pat Tetro, who is the director of the LGBTQA Center, Resource Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Welcome. And C. Balta and Robin Wiesman. Did I say that right? Wisman. I knew I'd mess it up. Well, welcome all of you. I'm going to start this conversation out today to have you tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you from Nebraska? Are you from somewhere else? What have been some of your experiences and connections with the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community? Robin, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I'm originally from Indiana. I grew up in a town of about 3,500 people there, near Cincinnati, Ohio, actually. And I originally came to Lincoln for grad school back in 2000. And I would say I've been pretty active within the LGBT community since then, on committees at UNL, and also active in the Lincoln community. I was one of the founding board members of Outlink.
Okay.
And I do a lot of speaking and that sort of stuff.
Cool.
I was born in California, Southern California, and moved here when I was 9.
Okay.
So this is pretty much my hometown.
Excellent.
I have been involved in the LGBTQA community since I was in high school, and I was part of the GSA at Lincoln High. After that, I was part of the group at UNL, which I think was titled Spectrum back then. I also did some outspeaking panels and volunteering in the community. More recently, I've been, past 2 years, been doing the entertainment for Star City Pride. And so those are just kind of the various ways that I've been involved in the community.
Very good, thank you.
I'm also a transplant.
Okay.
I have lived in Lincoln, though, for 25 years.
Yes.
I came here post-graduate school to do a postdoctoral fellowship in the law psychology program.
Okay.
And then never left town.
Uh-huh.
So I have been an employee at UNL for 20 years this fall.
Okay.
And my first involvement working for the LGBTQA community was in grad school.
Okay.
And that was as a co-founding president of the student organization at Kansas State University.
Okay.
So since that time, I started out working as the sex ed coordinator at the University Health Center, and because there wasn't anybody doing any work with the LGBT population at the university, I incorporated that in under the topic of human sexuality.
Okay.
And was a member of the Committee on GLBT Concerns from the time I started, and eventually shifted over into the position I'm in. So doing LGBT work has been part of my work life as well as my personal life in terms of working to try to achieve some equity for the LGBT population.
So, C and Robin, tell us of your experience going and being part of Lincoln as a community. Has it been positive? Have you ever experienced bias?
You the first one, yeah.
You know, I feel like I've been very lucky. I'm a very supportive mother, and have surrounded myself with very great people. As far as out and about, it's definitely nerve-wracking. You never know quite how people are going to respond to you. Simple things like going to the bathroom, using the restroom at places, the looks, people checking IDs and looking at my name, and not really understanding, and you just never know what you're gonna run into, or what people are gonna think of you, or how they're gonna react. Those are kind of the things in general that come to my mind just as an everyday part of life.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it seems that I've always said that from when I first moved to Lincoln, the people here are some of the nicest people I've ever met anywhere in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But the downside of that Nebraska nice, that I like to call it, is that you sometimes, I think, don't really know what people are thinking about you. And so even it seems like if they did have negative thoughts about you, you wouldn't necessarily hear about them.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I usually don't feel unsafe in Lincoln, but at the same time, I guess the bias that I feel hasn't been as much interpersonal bias as it has been institutionalized bias.
Okay.
When you talk about, lack of protections for LGBT people in our community, and like working at the university, we just recently got Employee Plus One benefits passed, and I think that was something we've been working on since the late 80s, that they've been approaching the Board of Regents to give equitable benefits to same-sex partners of employees, and it took us until 2012 to get that passed, and it'll be 2013 by the time it's implemented. So just dealing with that sort of institutionalized bias, I think, is one of the more challenging things. Like, you're just trying to go about your life, and there's all these extra hurdles that you have to jump over and things that you have to worry about, that I think that maybe people who are in opposite sex relationships never even have to, it doesn't cross their mind.
So very subtle, I guess, in the way that you feel discrimination. It's not very outward, it's more
Covert.
Yeah, you can tell by the institutionalized.
It's hard for strong relationships to remain strong when there's a lack of access to average everyday benefits that other heterosexual couples and families would experience. What are some of your thoughts on that, Dr. Tetreault?
Well, because of the work that I do, I hear a lot or witness or experience a lot of stigma, a lot of prejudice and discrimination. And again, I don't think that it's necessarily real direct, overt discrimination.
So the people who come to you for like counseling or mentoring, you see them, they report this a lot?
Well, we do a real wide variety of things at the Resource Center.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I do is students can come to me to report bias incidents.
Okay.
And so separate from that, I hear about comments that are made or discrepancies in how somebody might be treated, or as a member of the university environment, I've been able to see, since I've been there for a long time, how things have changed and improved. But at the same time, there's still a lot of passive to not so passive resistance to complete inclusion and equity for LGBTQA people. And so even with the obtaining of the domestic partner benefits, or E+1 as we're calling them, the reality is that it's still not totally equitable, because for individuals accessing that, it will be a taxed benefit, unlike for individuals or couples whose families are recognized by the government.
So that's a federal law?
That's a federal law, as well as a state law, because there's different levels for when you look at state and federal tax. But Nebraska also does not recognize same-sex couples. And so even individuals who are legally married in another state, for example, Iowa, the government does not recognize that marriage here in Nebraska. But from the federal level, there's also that exception to the full faith and credit clause. And so the federal government not only condones that discrimination, but the federal government doesn't recognize those legal marriages either.
Means they can't access Social Security benefits, which
Right.
is a big one.
Right. So there's over 1,000 benefits that are provided to families and couples that are recognized by the government.
For instance, you couldn't bring your partner from a foreign country.
Right.
You may be legally married, let's say in Britain, You can't have them come here.
Well, in Britain, we'll also recognize domestic partners, whereas the United States not only doesn't recognize domestic partners, but doesn't recognize those legal marriages in other countries. Or again, for individuals who maybe get married here, in places where they are recognized, those don't count either. But then we also have places on campus that are more welcoming and inclusive and recognize the LGBT population and want to work with us. But there's still areas and pockets where there's concern about too much visibility for LGBT stuff, or not wanting to partner because of what people will think. So the stigma and bias is not just to the LGBT community, but it's also to individuals who may want to be allies to us, or maybe who don't want to be allies to us. And so there's a lot of support for status quo, especially when there's institutionalized discrimination. Although I do have to say that, again, there's been a lot of progress. It's just that we still have a long way to go.
What does equality before the law, the state's motto, mean to you? Robin?
It doesn't mean much to me.
You haven't experienced. Okay. But what do you see? What do you see that you're not experiencing?
Well, actually, this came up as a really funny conversation. My partner has 3 kids, one of which is a 10-year-old boy, and she was talking to him about the fact that we're not able to get married here in Nebraska. Like, it wouldn't be recognized because, in Nebraska, 2 people of the same sex can't be legally married. And he just got this most perplexed look on his face, and he said, "But isn't our state motto equality before the law?"
Smart kid.
Yeah, he was like, I thought Nebraska would allow that, and it was kind of sweet that, he's young and naive, I suppose, but he thought it was just really a no-brainer that equality before the law means that everyone should have access to, the same rights, the same institutions, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, they're just words at this point. You don't
How does
feel
it impact your family then? Your partner and you, 3 children?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, some people argue marriage, it's just a piece of paper and, a couple of rings or whatever, but there's something else that comes with marriage. The people expect something different of you. When you say that you're married, I think people take you more seriously than saying, "Oh, this is my girlfriend," or "This is my partner." When you say we're married, that means we've made a commitment to spend our lives together. And that's what people can expect from us, And when you kind of don't have access to that, it seems as though people never really know where you are in your relationship, or whether you're really serious or this is long term or not. And also, it hits home when, Pat was talking about over 1,000 federal rights that you get just from being able to be married. That hits home as well. My partner's going to school full time, and so it'd be really nice if I could just easily provide insurance coverage and all that sort of stuff for her. Luckily, being an employee of the university, that's coming, but as Pat said, we can take advantage of that starting in January, but there's going to be a heavy tax burden that comes along with it. So it's like you can have those benefits, but you're in effect taking a pay cut to do it, because once you have to pay all those extra taxes. And so, that's tough. And you try not to get bitter about it, but at the same time, there's just not a sensible reason to explain why it is that we're in this different category and just don't have the same access to things that other people do. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. See, what's good about being out?
The ability to not feel like you're hiding anything, the ability to feel genuine and just authentic, and feel less like, like I'm hiding who I am. There's just a comfort that comes along with just being who you are. So I'd say that is the biggest benefit of being out.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
What happens, Dr. Tetro, when people are closeted?
Well, I think that creates stress because there's always that underlying concern about what if people find out, including your family. So the people that you're closest to, If you don't feel like you can be accepted by them for who you are, then there's that impact on your life because you have to hide who you are from the people who are supposed to be there to love and support you. And some of why people don't come out is because they're very concerned about how their family and friends will react and whether or not they will continue to be their family and friends. There's also the aspect of will you be hired? Will you lose your job? How will people treat you even if you don't get fired? There's the discrepancy in benefits. There's also housing issues, so that people sometimes are concerned about whether someone will rent or sell to them, and what if my landlord finds out? It creates a lot of additional stress. And so people understand, I think, the impact of stress in our lives, and this is a lot of additional unnecessary stress that people have to deal with because of societal acceptance of the prejudice and discrimination that exist.
Does it impact people's health?
Oh yes, there's documented evidence. The term is actually minority stress, and basically what it shows is that when people experience stigma, prejudice, and discrimination, that it has physical and psychological impacts on the quality of their health and well-being.
One thing I do want to bring up, because when this city was kind of playing around with the idea of a fairness ordinance, a lot of people were saying, well, hey, nobody says that they're being discriminated against. But my experience is that I've known a number of people who have, but they're not very willing to step forward to be discriminated against again. And one person I'm thinking of has a very professional job, lost 2 different really good jobs just because she was seen going into a gay bar. A couple years apart on each. So the 3rd great job, she said, no, not ever again. So she lives with the stress that you're talking about.
Right. Well, and the other is, I think the people who say that it doesn't exist are unwilling to actually listen to the people who experience the prejudice and discrimination and bias. I hear even from students, again, sometimes they're not fired at their work, but they work in what I would consider unfriendly environments, so that they get ridiculed, or people call them names, or they stay closeted because they hear negative comments and they are concerned that if I lose my job, then how do I pay my rent? How do I buy food? So there's a lot of that type of impact on people, and it stresses people out to know that you're not thought of as a person, but you're thought of as a member of a category. And I think that one of the aspects of being closeted is LGBTQ people know how to pass. It's not necessarily that they want to have to do that, it's that that's the only way they feel safe enough living their life. And I think that it does take a toll on people, but I think it also diminishes relationships with everybody else, because how can you do the best that you can when you're considered to be less than everyone else? And I also think another aspect of that came out with the Fairness Ordinance is there's a certain amount of recognition that the discrimination does happen, but people feel like they should have the right to discriminate against LGBT people. And so, which seems kind of un-American, to be able to say, we're here, we believe in equal rights, liberty and justice for all, except for you. So, to me it's a little bit hypocritical. I'll stop there.
So I want to ask, a few things came up for me when Dr. Tektro was talking about. Do you feel limited do you feel like people look at you sometime as a category? Do you feel like they don't see you as a whole person?
I guess, I mean, when you feel like your rights are sort of rationed and like these are the ones that you have and these are that you don't, then it's hard to ever feel like you're seen as completely whole and you know, as a person. I say that a lot of times you feel like you're treated as somehow less than in sometimes subtle ways, sometimes not so subtle ways. And so it does get frustrating being treated as somehow less than. And just being accused of being like amoral and that kind of stuff because of your sexual orientation, you know, like, I don't know. It does. It just gets frustrating, like I said. And the minority stress that Pat was talking about definitely is true, you know, when you have to worry about all this extra stuff that other people just don't have to worry about in terms of the safety and well-being of your family and yourself. So.
And I think just being identified, I am very, you know, proud of the LGBT community and very outspoken an activist for the community. But I think it's difficult when you are known as someone from the LGBT community and as like one of the overlying parts of you, and not you as an individual. So I think that's kind of one of the difficult things that was kind of frustrating, that just because I'm part of this community and very passionate about it, I don't want that to be the main descriptor of who I am as a person. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I've been noticing and you know, get frustrated about, because I'm just a human being, just wanting to live comfortably like everyone else and have a happy life. And, yeah.
So do you think that a diversity of voices from the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community has opportunity to be heard in this community, to the larger community?
I often feel like we're preaching to the choir. Like, those people who we have an opportunity to speak to are often the people who already get it. Like, they understand and, you know, like, and so what I find difficult is being able to have an opportunity to speak with those people who I'd really like to see them change their minds a little bit, or, you know, like, I don't know. I get that feeling a lot.
You'd like to find some common ground?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't really have much common ground, do we, in Lincoln? What do you think?
Well, I think our society is pretty polarized, and not just on this issue. And so there is a lot of area where we could overlap or intersect, but I don't think that happens very often because people are so entrenched in their viewpoints. And when people don't want to hear what you have to say, in some ways it doesn't matter what you're saying. So I think part of what I would say is people being a little more open-minded and actually being willing to try to understand what it's like to be a minority in a state that really wants to quell the minority's voice. I do think we have opportunities and to speak and be heard, but again, I think that people have to be willing to listen too.
I actually feel like there is a lot of common ground. I say that a lot, you know, like with my partner and our family, we do the same. Our family life looks just like anyone else's family life, you know, like we're going to softball games and baseball games and, you know, parent-teacher meetings, and that it's the same as if it was a mother and father, you know, like there's a lot of common ground, the things that we have to do, the way our lives look. They're much more similar to other people's lives than different, but people just get too caught up on the differences, I think, focus on that too much, as opposed to, like, really appreciating all the ways that we're just the same and we're all human.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming today, and thank you for your work. Each of you have done different things in our community, and I know that I appreciate it. I'm sure many others do as well. And I want to remind our audience, that our viewers, that this is the Watchful Citizen Show, and we're sponsored by the Lancaster County Democrats. And we meet every third Tuesday of the month down at the Communication Workers Union Hall. at 25th and N Streets at 7 p.m. And there you'll get to meet a diversity of engaged people who want to be change agents in their community for the positive. And sometimes you get to meet candidates, sometimes you get to meet other like-minded people, but it's exciting to be part of that political process. So I encourage you to come down and visit us, get to know us. And again, thanks to each of you for coming today, and I'm sure in a few months we'll revisit these issues. There are many topics that came up. For instance, I'd like to talk more about transgender issues. And that's something for another day. So thank you so much for watching.